Hey, I'm Matt. Welcome to my podcast, The Imagining, a time to explore the imagination, creativity, and mental health. All of the conversations I'm having form part of the research for my new book. I hope that you have the opportunity during this time to discover something new about yourself. Welcome back to Patch in this office space.
Yeah.
You've been here before. You just told me that you kitted it out, or maybe that doesn't necessarily mean you were the guy that lifted all the chairs in.
No, I wasn't here with the saws and the machines, but my company that I used to work for were the ones that won the project to fit it out.
So what does that look like? I mean, what is your job title?
So I am a client accounts director.
Right.
Which
is that as exciting as it sounds?
No, it's a fancy way of saying that basically I phone people up that don't really want to be phoned and try and get them to let us go in and meet them for them to spend hundreds to millions of pounds on a new office space.
Gosh, and that's all over London, you were saying?
Well, it's all over the UK really, but predominantly it's kind of 90% London.
Is that quite a competitive industry to work in?
Yeah, it's for London alone, and this was a couple of years ago, there was about 160 companies that did exactly the same thing. So it is literally just a case of who you know, if you can get to someone faster than the next person.
Do you think there's anything you do? I mean, this might not be your job particularly, but what do you do to try and stand out then in such a competitive space?
It's a very social thing. So for me as a person, when it comes to speaking to people, I'm a lot more of a consultative kind of style of, I suppose, salesperson. Unlike the kind of 1980s double glazing Essex salespeople that will just literally bash you over the head and keep bashing you until you agree to a meeting. But for me, it's more about educating. It's more about understanding what the person's potential issues are, and also then how us as a business can sort those in a different way to the rest of the market. It's at the end of the day, it's a people by people thing. There are 100 companies that can do exactly the same thing technically, but if you are a nicer person, a more informed person, more educated person when it comes to working with these people, because they're spending millions of pounds to somewhere that people spend more time than their houses.
Yeah.
So
that's a serious commitment. Yeah.
You need to kind of trust and almost like the person that you are working for you.
So one of the first things you said when you came in, or on your sheet, or what your spouse told me, is I'm not creative.
No.
But we're going to tease it out of you. How do you feel that you use your creativity in your job to kind of stand out or make it go well? And
again, it's what I think I deem creativity probably differently to other people, or so on and so forth. I think it's a bit of a kind of secret creativity. I'm
right.
By absolutely no means an artist. I think my GCSE, SATS art exam was to draw a hand holding something, and I literally drew around my hand and had a clear protractor that I put on it.
I mean, some might say that's fine art.
No, certainly not. But when it comes to speaking to people, it's more about listening. It's more about where you pause. It's more about how you approach certain subjects. Because you're speaking to different levels of people, you can be speaking to an office manager or receptionist or EA to kind of try and get through to somebody, or you can be speaking to the managing director of a company that turns over £1 billion. You just have to be able to kind of gauge the level of conversation you need to be at, how you need to approach it.
Because I guess that's actually, in a sense, and it's not a subject which has come up yet, but I'm kind of glad that it did, this idea of listening. And I guess it takes listening to be able to appropriately form and imagine an environment that you want to create, doesn't it? Like it not just, I'm not specifically talking about the environment of the workspace environment, physical, the environment as in the conversational environment, the space in which you're engaging with another person. By listening, you're thereby informed enough to create a space in which that person feels heard, in which that person feels empowered, in which that person feels like you're going to do the job best for them.
Yeah, but again, I think it's a strange thing because I've been doing the same job really for 15 years. So I use these things really well in the role of work. But I suppose if you used to speak to my wife or kids or things like that, for me, it's something that I actually struggle with kind of every other time.
Right.
Listening and not kind of forming an opinion in my head before actually listening to what the person has to say. Whereas when it comes to work stuff, because I kind of know what I'm listening for, and the conversations, they may differ slightly from person to person, but they follow the same kind of guideline. You're trying to get the same information out. It's just a different way of doing it dependent upon the person. Whereas I should probably take that into my own life and sit there and go, right, okay, but I don't want to kind of almost play my family in terms of things like that. I don't want it to be a job where I listen to them because I feel like I'm only doing it to get the best end result.
I guess that's the weird thing about it, isn't it? If there's a professionalism attached to a certain skill, to then use that same skill at home. Because I don't know whether you've seen that there's this thing called Masterclass, which is always popping up on my YouTube ads and different stuff like that, where one of the big classes they do is like a negotiator who's worked with like to negotiate to have hostages sent free. And I always think like, oh man, does that not give him a leg up in his marriage if he's married or for something like that? Like, imagine being a professional negotiator.
Yeah, you would think so.
Like, I wonder if there's like becomes ethical dilemmas with being too efficient at negotiating or too efficient at listening. It sounds like really you'd have to probably push it quite hard with the listening one.
Well, yeah, it's quite difficult because I will be having a conversation with my wife and again, the way that I sometimes will sit there and approach things and the way that I will speak is kind of work Terry. So it's one of those things that how I approach things and how I vocalize something is me trying to almost sell or me trying to almost kind of make her buy what I'm telling her, which is not the right way to kind of focus it.
Yeah.
So I try and stick as far away from work Terry and family Terry as humanly possible in those two different kind of areas. You drop your whatever baggage you've come from at the door when you walk into work, and it's kind of head down and focus on how you're kind of discuss things with people. Because again, it's like I could be speaking to somebody on a Monday that you never know whether they've had an argument with their wife, whether they've run over the cat, any kind of all of those things. You don't know what's happened with that person, and they can treat you in a certain way. And you can phone them literally 12 hours later and have a totally different conversation because something totally different has happened.
Yeah.
So it is just adapting to that in that work environment, but learning to kind of adapt to it in a different way in a home environment.
Yeah, man. What was it like for you growing up, and how does it affect you now?
So I suppose there were definite pros and cons to me growing up. I was so fortunate to have the most amazing grandparents. And I was also so fortunate to find something I loved doing as a child. So I was fortunate enough to be in the West End doing musical theatre I was in Oliver twice, I was in Joseph, did some TV stuff and things like that. So for me, that was my happy place at that point. But then you kind of go through things with parents divorcing, with a sibling being put into care through parents' choice, with parents moving to the other side of the world and kind of you being there on your own with one younger sibling and then the other one had gone, to being 20 and being told that your younger brother had just passed away and having to organise and arrange everything because the rest of your family are all scattered at different places in the world. So you become kind of the person that everyone speaks to and has to tell everyone these things. To, again, then finding yourself in a 11-year kind of abusive relationship, basically taking everything you humanly possibly could whilst distancing yourself from absolutely everybody and absolutely everything. I am so aware that this is kind of, again, white middle class first world problems, and there are people in this world that face a million times worse on a daily basis. But for me, there were hurdles to jump. There were things that I had to kind of either move to the back of my head or deal with. And there were certain things like funerals and stuff that I had to organise and deal with. But there were certain things that you could then move to the back of your head. And then it only really highlights the negative things that you've had to deal with and had to go through when you have something that becomes so positive in your life. So meeting my wife now of 9 years, 10 years ago, finding faith and meeting certain people and learning certain things and being able to kind of focus on different things, and also being in a environment where mental health is openly spoken about and neurodiversity is openly discussed, and all of these different things are a lot more commonplace than they ever were for the first 30 years of my life. Really kind of shone a negative light on what I had to go through.
Yeah. But
it also is a massive beam of light to show you where you're going and show me how fortunate I am to have certain people in my life and to have certain situations in my life that people aren't ever lucky enough to have.
And I would be, I don't want to miss the opportunity to ask about your name as well, because I know there's an interesting story that comes from that.
So I'm again, with my nan and granddad, I'm very fortunate that my granddad, Terry Lawless, was a boxing promoter and manager, and he had managed people like Jim Watt and Frank Bruno, and I think had 5 world champions and multiple European and British champions, and for me, my relationship with my granddad and my nan and granddad specifically that's why I am who I am. I could have so easily have become bitter and become jealous and become kind of broken, like a lot of the people I ended up finding myself being around.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I'd say my granddad's no longer with us, unfortunately, but my nan is, and we're actually going to see her tomorrow. It's one of those things that they showed me who I am. My granddad showed me how to be a man and how to kind of do things going forwards. And considering the years he was and how he was born, I think 1934, I think he was born. It's one of those things that he was so kind and so tactile and so loving and so kind of for everybody else that it's just so rare in that generation, especially considering he was kind of brought up in the East End of London, rough area, kind of spent all of his time around hard people, kind of gangland affiliations due to his kind of boxing and stuff like that. How he became the type of person that he was is every day kind of how I wake up trying to emulate.
That's amazing. Do you feel like the boxing culture, was that kind of held back from you by him, or was that kind of brought into your household?
I mean, again, I was fortunate to live with them for quite a specific amount of time, but he was just as happy with me doing musical theatre and the more feminine aspects of things that I did, because he didn't really want me to go into that world. He kind of saw how people get hurt and how people were treated, and he was, again, always known as the person who looked after these fighters above and beyond anything, almost to the detriment financially and kind of historically of where they wanted to go in terms of their careers. But it most certainly kind of made me feel so comfortable that he had both knowledge of that world and the boxing and the kind of hard life, but he was also so able to be such a soft, kind, loving person.
Yeah. And I guess that's actually, at least my interpretation, or the kind of man that I would like to be, is that it embodies the best of both worlds, doesn't it? I don't want this to be a comment on my opinion about gender stereotypes or anything like that, but there is certainly something that I feel, deeply about this one hand and one arm to be strong, and and another hand to hold and be gentle and be safe. And it sounds like,
but it's difficult because it goes on, everything becomes a personal expectation. So for me, I sometimes over masculinate things due to my own expectation, not my wife's expectation. We have, if an alien was to come down and look in our house, I do all the cooking, I do all the washing, ironing, and my wife does all the DIY and more the masculine role. She drives everywhere. So for us, it's just what we feel more comfortable doing and what we want to do. And we've had arguments over who takes out the bins or things like that, as couples do. But I love the fact that through my upbringing in that essence with my granddad and my nan, that I've been able to get to a point where, for me, kind of gender stereotypes and gender roles and things like that aren't a barrier to anything. It doesn't matter if I do it or Eddie does it. It's one of those things that, as long as it's done, it's done.
It's fair
not,
game.
It's not a case of I can only do things because I'm a man, and she can only do things because she's a woman. And that is, again, something that we want to kind of impart onto our children. And again, I will be 100% honest and say I learned something from my daughter on gender roles, on the way that kind of women's rights and all of these things every single day. Because I make mistakes, of course I do. Say the wrong things sometimes without even thinking about it. But I'm just very happy and very glad that I've got people there to kind of go, no, think about that in a different way.
Try again.
Think about that in a different way. That's not the way it's kind of said or portrayed. So, but as I say, my upbringing and who I am as a person and who I want to instill upon my children to be very much emulates from my grandparents.
That's beautiful. Big picture, what's your understanding of the world of men's mental health? I know we're speaking from a context of white middle class Chelmsford here, and obviously we dip in and out of London quite a lot through working life and stuff like that. But what's your understanding?
for me, somebody who has struggled with mental health, someone who goes through depression, anxiety, and stress, someone who, as saying, going back years upon years of family breakups, of siblings passing away as children, of being in a domestic abusive relationship towards me, being a victim of abuse and adultery and all of those things, to then find faith and go through different stuff like that. For me, it's men's mental health is somewhere where you shouldn't really be.
Right.
Men aren't meant to be in that position where they're worried about the small things, or where they're worried about something that they can then be perceived as being weak or being emasculine, stuff like that. So for me, it's grasping that understanding of knowing that you are who you are.
Yeah.
Every single person on this planet is different.
Yeah.
And the way that people deal with things is different. So it's being able to be in a position, whether people allow you to be or not, to accept that, seek help, and understand yourself in certain ways that people will never understand you.
Yeah. What's that journey been like for you then? I know that you've articulated it a bit before in conversations that we've had, but for you, what's this? Because it's that, obviously there's been a couple of big rocks through your life of things that have obviously either been really painful or I guess really joyous. What's the journey of mental health been like?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was always an advocate of compartmentalization.
Right.
So for me, it went in a box, it went along a conveyor belt. It's like Gringotts from Harry Potter. It's one of those things where everything's in its own little vault, and every now and then someone turns the jack in the box a bit too much and it pops.
Right.
So it's putting yourself in a position where you're not really thinking about it. You're thinking about something different. Because if you keep thinking about that, and then you keep thinking about the next thing, and you keep thinking about the next thing, you're just really off guard for anything else that comes up. Especially, again, being in a family where you're having to deal with neurodiversity and mental health in children, and mental health in your wife, and so on and so forth, and all different things going forwards. So it's really hard to kind of put yourself first.
Yeah. What do you feel like do you ever feel like you want to bring things more together? Obviously, like in the sense of the compartmentalizing thing. Do you ever feel like you wish they were in a more narrow line, or do you enjoy organizing it like that, or is that helping you or not helping you? Or
I think inevitably everything is linked.
Yeah.
Whether you put these things so far away from each other, a person's journey from birth to death, it's unavoidable that the things that happen along the way lead to the next and lead to the next. And everything affects how you deal with the next thing.
Yeah.
So for me, I may compartmentalize it, but it is all still aligned. Yeah. And again, it's you go to therapy, you go to counselling, you learn these different techniques, you try and understand things that you didn't know, or you just hear the things that you did know, but it gives you a space to feel it in a way that you should feel it all the time. It gives you that license to kind of talk about these things in a space where it's not really going to affect anything else that physically that happens outside. Yeah.
So another thing that would be really helpful to touch on is, and me and you have this in common, in that we're both taking tablets for our mental health. And I feel as though we're still, I mean, for me, whenever I take my tablet out of the little old person box, as I call it, in the morning with the different colours and the different days
of the week. Yeah.
and I get it out of my little pill box, and I take it every morning. And there's still, after I've been taking them for maybe like 4 or 5 years at this point, there's still a sense of, damn, if only I could be, strong enough. I'm holding up bunny ears for anyone that's listening. If only I could be strong enough or brave enough or have the resilience to not take these. Even though I know that it's nothing to be shameful about. But do you kind of have that similar struggle?
Not with regards to medication. For me, it's one of those things that I've got absolutely no problem with taking them. My thing sometimes is when they run out, it's being quick enough to replenish.
I actually had that the other day.
Or things like that. And for me, I think after kind of 2-3 days, you don't really realise that anything is different.
Yeah.
But the people around you actually realise that how you're speaking about certain things, how you are approaching certain conversations, the level of which you're speaking to people, like the tonality, the volume, all kind of change slightly.
Yeah.
And you as an individual don't really see that.
Yeah.
But the people around you most certainly do. And it's them putting 2 and 2 together saying, right, you've not had your tablet for a couple of days. You need to kind of
maybe you
go and get it.
Yeah, pick them up now.
And it's one of those things whilst you're taking them, you don't realise that they actually do anything.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it doesn't make you, it's not like it gives you a superpower. It doesn't like change the way that you do something.
It's not like suddenly everything's in colour.
No, and I mean, having 3 children that have all got neurodiversity, whether it be ADHD, OCD, misophonia, autism, the plethora of spectrum, and are medicated with different medications. As someone outside, you can definitely tell when they've not taken their tablet.
Yeah.
Because their process is just totally different.
Yeah.
But yet, as a child, you kind of rebel against taking it as they do. It's okay, I've got a capsule here. What I'll do is I'll say I've taken it, I'll split it in half, pour it down the sink, and because I just don't like taking it. I don't like how it makes me feel. I don't like what it kind of makes me feel like.
Yeah. Do you think that's it's hard, isn't it? Because whilst the tablet could be argued that it's like obviously helping them, like it's easy to understand why they might feel that way about the tablet. Like,
I think when you're a child, it's bad enough that you're different to everybody else because you're neurodiverse.
Yeah.
When you then add in the fact that you take tablets which diminish you as a person because it gives you that clarity of thought, but at the same time it changes who you are for that 8 hours of slow release.
Yeah.
To the point where you can't eat when you want to eat because your appetite is affected.
Yeah.
To the point where you are just a dulled down version of yourself.
Yeah.
And getting that balance of do we take it all through the week and leave the weekend? Do we include the weekend because it's like starting all over again on a Monday? Yeah. It's an absolute balancing act that you kind of have to sort out. The dosages, you have to kind of make sure that you've got all that sorted.
Because I was always a bit struck by that, actually, less so with me. But we share a mutual friend whose eldest child takes tablets every day. And I was shocked at how much they really didn't want to take the tablet. Mm-hmm. Like, it really struck me as something that I was really genuinely confused by, because I was just like, but surely this is helping you. You know, surely you feel like it's actually doing something good for you.
But it's also, it's solely in their head, because unless they go around telling everybody that they take tablets every morning, nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's not something that we go around broadcasting. It's not something that the school basically announce at the beginning of every lesson. Can you be careful today because Seth is on tablets? So it's definitely a self-driven thought and ideology. It's them going, oh, people are going to think that I'm weird because I'm on tablets. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to not take the tablet. Where in reality, people will think that they're weirder in their normal form.
Yeah.
When how they behave, how they act, how they interact with people, how they have the potential to get themselves in trouble, and kind of how they mix with people in a different way.
What's the advice that you would give perhaps to parents of people maybe in your circumstance, but also maybe people in your own circumstances in regards to your own mental health?
With regards to medication, it's solely there to help you. It's one of those things that, you can grow out of it, but at that, I mean, again, we can open a whole other can of worms of the school system and how...
Yeah, I've been refraining a little bit from asking the question. It's one of them things where everything comes back to the school system and the NHS.
This is it. It's like you can open a whole can of worms and go, right, okay, the school system doesn't suit people who are neurodiverse, so they wouldn't have to take tablets if they didn't feel like they had to fit into a square hole. But it's not going to change anytime soon. So being a parent of somebody who has homeschooled somebody from year 8 onwards, our middle child has a day off where she doesn't go into school every week and only does a certain number of lessons because that's how much she can handle. And the youngest, who, again, it's like behaviour dictates things going forwards and how he's perceived by other people. So school is the crux. If there were...
Everything's working around that.
It's kind of like that's the period that they have to be a certain way because they have to learn a certain thing and they have to be a certain level of behaved during a certain day, which again, I agree with. But if you go back 30 years ago, when there was people of my age who ADHD wasn't a thing, it wasn't even considered, they were just naughty, they were just out to disrupt, they were just out to make everyone else's day a living nightmare. But with all of this kind of amazing progression in diagnosis and things like that, the other kind of elephant in the room comes up with the NHS, that it now takes 2.5 years to get a diagnosis from start point to end point. It then takes X amount number of time to then get appointments for therapists, for people to check medications, for all of those different things. So you have then a very select few people who can afford to do that privately, which is then getting busier and busier and busier. And it leads to the fact that you've now got a load of adults that are getting diagnosed, which then clogs the system even more.
Yeah.
Which again is not a negative or a knock on the people who are getting diagnosed, but the system isn't set up.
Yeah.
So what it's then doing is it's then negatively affecting these people who are having to wait for 2.5, 3 years because they can't get the help that's needed.
So just, you can touch on it again. You've laid the platform. As someone that's living through it, do you have advice for other people living through it, do you think?
Patience. It is purely patience. But at the same time, as we've had to do, you've also got to be prepared to fight your corner. You've got to be prepared to go to certain people, and you've got to be prepared to kick up a bit of a fuss. Unfortunately, being British and polite and queuing with this stuff doesn't get you anywhere. So for us, it's literally just been, okay, have the patience at the beginning. You don't want to be that family that kicks up a fuss at everything, but it gets to a certain point where you kind of have to.
Yeah.
To progress anything, to move anything forwards.
Yeah.
As they say, it's like the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. you have to be prepared to fight your
Make a
child's
bit of noise about
battle.
something. Yeah, and I guess the encouragement to people around them is, if you see a parent or someone struggling to make the noise, like maybe you could help make the noise on behalf of them.
Yeah, and I mean, my wife and I, one of the massive things we've always wanted to do is to kind of be in a position eventually at some point where we can help the children specifically who can't afford private diagnosis and then can't afford the time of NHS diagnosis. And we can also help the parents at the same time, because it's all well and good living with this thing, but the amount of people who kind of are suffering in silence with home life and how difficult it is leading certain things and having to get a phone call from a school every evening and having to change your whole life because your child doesn't fit within a certain frame. It is, honestly, it's worth the kind of battle to make sure that your child has the best chance at moving forwards.
What then do you see? Because at the same time as this being a very real and evident struggle for your children also exhibit extraordinary qualities of creativity and imagination and skillfulness. How do you see them two things kind of existing in the same world? Because I think by now it's probably a bit of a common understanding that neurodivergence both means elephant in the room in terms of some environments, but it means excel at things in other environments. How have you seen that play out?
I mean, our three kids are absolutely phenomenal. That they are amazing human beings. It is an absolute superpower for slightly later life. The unfortunate thing is that time between 10 and kind of 18, you are fighting a losing battle. And you find yourself and you speak to people and it's like, if we can just get them through school, then all the things that really annoy people about children with neurodiversity, when they are in that gap in the middle, the lack of authority, like lack of need for authority, the entrepreneurship of their mind, how quickly it works, becomes an amazing asset once they need to branch out on their own. So I said our son is 17, going to be 18 in 6 months. So it's, for him, he is amazing with his hands. He's amazing at driving himself forwards. But that's not really going to come to fruition for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And our daughter is so driven, so bright, so amazing, so independent, so just the most beautiful, amazing person. But yet people will see her as strange. People will see her as different. People will see her as one of the lucky ones that gets to not have to go to lessons or things like that. But they don't see the toll on mental health that takes behind the scenes. And you can't really explain to another child who is kind of normal neuro kind of understanding what that means getting up in the morning.
The cost associated with just waking up. And
for the fact that, I mean, we've been very, very, very fortunate. And again, shout out to actually St John Payne School, who have been amazing with our daughter and given us every advantage for her that she needs to fulfill what she can. But there are so many schools that will just go, right, I'll wipe my hands, especially if the child doesn't present as being bright. We're very fortunate that she's so kind of hardworking and bright. Whereas we know of people whose child is not as bright, therefore doesn't necessarily get the same opportunities.
What's the hope from, not just the hope that you have, but what can people find hope in these circumstances?
It's the kind of opportunities that are there, and it's what that child can become. Yeah, there's the same opportunities for people with neurodiversity as there are for normal neurointelligence, but it just takes longer for neurodiversity to get there.
Yeah.
Because they struggle with the eye-to-eye interaction. They struggle with these different elements. But once you hire them, or once you put them in a position where they're comfortable, then you will absolutely see the best. Absolutely.
So I guess like the real key kind of things to put in play there are patience, as you already said. It's like just if you can hold safety and create a safe space for someone, be patient and kick up a fuss when you need to. Yeah,
again, you have to be prepared to fight, but then again, you also have to be prepared to work with education bodies. You have to be prepared to work with the NHS and show them a better way or a better understanding. Yeah,
give them a real view into the life.
I mean, there's a lot of decision makers that are kind of sitting there that have absolutely no idea as to how this happens, how this progresses, how this actually kind of moves on.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are tons of amazing Instagram accounts and tons of amazing YouTube channels of people that will explain to you exactly how their day progresses with ADHD or how their day progresses with autism. And you'll just see how amazing these people are.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, more than welcome.
It's amazing, and both you and Eddie are just really incredible people, and I have such a special place in my heart for those that are parenting children who are neurodiverse. I think that I found myself surrounded by parents of neurodiverse children, maybe because all of my friends are neurodiverse themselves, and neurodiverse creates neurodiverse, I guess, in some senses, although there is the occasional non-neurodiverse child among the mix.
It is funny when you've got a child that doesn't quite understand that their parent is exactly the same as them, so they'll do certain things and then they'll be surprised when their parent does exactly the same thing in exactly the same way and go, oh, well, actually, maybe we're not so different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's nice to see that, and it then becomes more of an understanding.
Yeah. I'm just waiting to see where Indy ends up. Oh, gosh. Fortunately, I feel like Jess is she's a very stable...
I'm sure Indy will be loved. I'm sure she will be treasured.
I can guarantee
no matter
the love.
What way.
Exactly, yeah. We'll see where he ends up.
No matter what way he goes.
Exactly. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you.
It's meant a lot to me that you've shared. And thank you for your vulnerability as well.
Oh, no, I'd say thank you for asking the questions and being willing to kind of sit and let me talk. So it's
anytime, man. We'll have to have you back. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Imagining. I hope that you've had the opportunity to discover something new about yourself. If you wouldn't mind and you enjoyed listening, then I would be really appreciative if you subscribed on whatever channel you're listening on.